People at the flea market thought. Officer Blake was joking when he stopped at a dusty corner stall, staring at a weak, injured German Shepherd being sold for just $10. The dog didn't move, didn't bark, didn't even lift his head. But the moment Blake knelt beside him, something stirred, something broken, something begging to be understood. The seller shrugged, saying the dog was useless now. A retired police dog nobody wanted. Blake reached into his pocket, unaware that buying this retired police dog for just $10 would uncover a secret and turn his entire department upside down. Stay with us because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind carried dust across the open fairground, the kind of empty roadside space where forgotten things were, quietly sold and quickly forgotten. Officer Blake Carter wasn't supposed to be here. He had only stopped to refuel his patrol car, but something unusual caught his eye. A cardboard sign hanging from a rusted pole, letters unevenly scribbled in black marker. Only tended doors. At first Blake thought it was a joke, but then he saw the dog. A German Shepherd lay on the dry ground, ribs faintly showing beneath thinning fur. His legs were covered in old scars and fresh wounds. His breathing was slow, too slow, and yet his eyes were alert, not confused, not lost. They were watching everything, every movement, every sound like a soldier still standing post. A man in a mud-stained vest stood beside him, arms crossed, gaze cold. $10, he muttered without emotion. Take him or leave him. Blake knelt slowly, careful not to startle the dog. Hey, buddy, he whispered. The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch, but his tail didn't move either. He simply stared at Blake with a strange mix of exhaustion and defiance. Where'd he come from? Blake asked. The seller shrugged. Retired police dog. Too old, too broken. Not worth feeding anymore. I'm getting rid of him today. Blake's jaw tightened. Something about the man's tone didn't sit right. Police dogs weren't dumped like trash, and they definitely weren't sold at roadside stops for the price of a fast food meal. The dog shifted slightly, revealing a faded patch of fur on his side, a mark that looked disturbingly like a burn scar. There were also symmetrical cuts near his thigh, too precise to be accidental. Blake's instincts fired instantly. These aren't normal duty injuries, he murmured. The seller stiffened. Look, officer, you asked a question. I answered it. $10, take him or walk away. Blake studied the German Shepherd again. The dog's ears twitched as if listening to the conversation. Then, in a small, trembling effort, he lifted his head and nudged it toward Blake's knee. A plea, a whisper of trust. Blake felt his chest tighten. This dog wasn't unwanted. He was scared. He was hurting and he was trying to choose him. Why so cheap? Blake pressed. The man avoided eye contact. He's sick. Doesn't have long. Just needs someone to take him off my hands. But Blake saw it. The subtle panic in the man's fingers. The way he kept glancing at the dog as if afraid of what the animal knew. Something wasn't right. Something was being hidden. Blake reached into his wallet, pulled out a $10 bill, and held it out. The seller snatched it quickly, as if relieved to be rid of the burden. Blake slipped his arms under the dog gently. The shepherd winced, but didn't resist. Don't die on me now, Blake whispered. But deep inside he felt it. This was no ordinary retired K9. This was the beginning of something, far bigger than a $10 rescue. Blake carried the German Shepherd toward his patrol car, feeling the dog's trembling muscles against his arms. The animal wasn't just weak. He was exhausted in a way that told a deeper story. A story of survival, not aging. A story of fear, not retirement. When Blake sat him gently on the back seat, the dog didn't curl up the way injured dogs normally did. Instead, he kept his head lifted, eyes locked on the man who had sold him, watching him, tracking him as if waiting for him to make one more move. Blake closed the door slowly, unease prickling up his spine. He walked back toward the cellar. You said he's retired from the force. Which department? The man scratched his neck, avoiding eye contact. Local unit a few towns over. Don't remember the name. Blake narrowed his eyes. Every K9 has paperwork, retirement forms, vet records. Where are his? The man shrugged again. Too quickly this time? Lost them. Look, officer, he's just an old dog someone dropped on me. I don't have anything else to tell you. Blake studied him closely. Sweaty palms, tapping foot, eyes constantly shifting toward the road. This wasn't just nervousness. This was fear. The dog in the back seat let out a low, rumbling growl. Not toward Blake, but toward the cellar. A warning. A message only the dog understood. Blake stepped closer. If someone hurt that dog even once, I need to know. The man raised both hands defensively. I didn't lay a hand on him. He came to me like that. Some guy dumped him late last night. What guy? Blake demanded. I don't know. He was in a hurry. Paid me to get rid of the dog today and not ask questions. Blake's heartbeat quickened. Paid to get rid of him? Why? Officer instincts surged through him like an electric pulse. Something about this transaction felt wrong. Not criminally sloppy, deliberately sloppy, like someone trying to erase a trail. Blake walked back to the patrol car, the man's words echoing in his mind. Paid to get rid of the dog used today. Don't ask questions. Don't keep him. He opened the back door and knelt again. The dog looked up at him with tired, intelligent eyes. Blake reached out slowly, placing a hand on the dog's neck. That's when he felt it. A faint indentation under the fur. A missing collar tag, not broken, not cut, removed. Someone didn't want you identified, Blake whispered. The dog's eyes flickered with a haunting recognition, as if remembering something dark. Blake glanced back at the cellar. The man was already walking away fast, like he couldn't escape quickly enough. The dog struggled to lift his head, letting out a soft, desperate whine, but not from pain, from urgency. Blake swallowed hard. This wasn't a normal rescue. This wasn't a retired K9. Something dangerous had happened to this dog, and someone wanted him gone before anyone could find out. And Blake had just walked straight into the middle of it. Blake opened the back door of the patrol car again, hoping the dog would lie down and rest. But instead, the shepherd pushed forward, struggling to sit upright despite the pain etched across his body. His eyes stayed locked on Blake as if he feared being left alone for even a second. It's okay, buddy, Blake murmured. You're safe now, but the dog didn't relax. His breathing was shallow, and every muscle trembled. Yet he kept inching toward the edge of the seat, determined to stay close. Blake gently pressed a hand against the dog's chest, guiding him back. Easy, easy. A low whimper escaped the dog's throat, not from weakness, but from refusal. He wanted to follow Blake. Wherever Blake went, he wanted to go. That's when Blake understood. This dog wasn't clinging out of fear. He was choosing him. Blake took a slow breath, moved by the unexpected trust. He glanced toward the cellar. The man was already speeding away in an old pickup truck, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Good, Blake, my thought, because he had questions, and he planned to find answers. He returned to the car, and as he opened the driver's door, he felt a soft weight press against his shoulder. The dog had struggled across the seat just to reach him, resting his head gently on Blake's arm, a silent plea. Don't leave me, the gesture hit Blake hard. All right, he whispered. I'm right here. He eased into the seat and the dog kept leaning closer as if reassuring himself that Blake was real, that he wasn't being abandoned again. As Blake started the engine, the dog lifted his head slightly and let out 3 small rhythmic barks. Not random, not distressed, patterned, trained. Blake froze. That was a signal, one he recognized from emergency K9 protocols. You're alerting me, Blake whispered, stunned. But about what? The dog's eyes moved, to the dusty windshield toward the road, where the seller had driven off. Blake followed his gaze, eyebrows furrowing. Something's wrong with that man, he muttered. The shepherd pressed his paw onto Blake's arm, weak, but deliberate. It was as close to a confirmation as a dog could give. Blake swallowed. Adrenaline building. This dog wasn't just refusing to be left behind. He was trying to communicate, trying to warn him. and despite the exhaustion shaking through his fragile body, he wasn't giving up. "All right, partner," Blake said quietly. "Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out." The dog laid his head gently on Blake's lap, and in that moment, without a single word spoken, a partnership and a mystery officially began. By the time Blake reached his home on the outskirts of town, dusk had already settled. The sky was painted in deep purples, and the quiet neighborhood seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful. Blake parked the patrol car gently, then lifted the German Shepherd into his arms. The dog was weak, but his eyes remained sharp, scanning every shadow as if danger could leap from it at any moment. Inside the house, Blake laid out a blanket near the fireplace. The warmth should have comforted the dog, but he didn't settle. Instead, he forced himself upright, sniffing the air with slow, deliberate breaths. "Relax, buddy," Blake said softly, kneeling beside him. "You're safe here." But safety wasn't what the dog sensed. In a sudden burst of tension, the shepherd turned toward the front door, ears pre-cricked, body trembling. He growled, a deep warning rumble that didn't match his weakened condition. Blake froze. Nothing was outside. No footsteps, no sound. But the dog kept staring, muscles coiled, ready to defend. Blake stepped to the window and peeked out. Darkness, an empty street, just rustling leaves. Still, the dog refused to sit down. Then he limped toward the hallway, sniffing, searching, pacing restlessly from door to door as if trying to locate something Blake couldn't see. Every movement looked painful, yet he pushed through it. "What are you looking for?" Blake whispered, following him. The dog stopped at the back door, the one that led to Blake's backyard. And there he began to scratch. Weakly at first, then harder, then with frantic urgency. "Hey, easy, easy," Blake said, catching him before he hurt himself. But the shepherd barked, sharp, urgent, demanding attention. Blake hesitated. "You want me to look outside?" The dog barked twice loud despite the exhaustion, then pressed his head firmly against the door. Something was out there, or something had been out there. Blake slowly opened the door, stepping into the cool night air. The backyard was silent, a calm sheet of wind brushing through the trees. But then Blake noticed it. The old shed at the far end of the yard. The door was slightly open. He never left it open. Blake's heart tightened. He stepped toward it slowly, hand hovering near his holster. But when he reached the shed and pushed the door wider, all he saw inside were old tools. Dusty shelves, harmless clutter. "Nothing," he murmured. But when he turned, the dog was standing right behind him. He had forced himself outside, trembling violently, his nose pointed at the shed floor. A whine escaped his throat. Soft, terrified, Blake knelt. "What is it? What happened here?" The shepherd didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe deeply. He was frozen, staring at a spot Blake hadn't noticed. A faint smear on the shed's wooden floor, dark, thin, almost wiped away. Blood, Blake's breath caught. Someone had been here recently, and the dog knew exactly who. Blake crouched beside the faint smear of blood, his pulse thudding in his ears. The shed was supposed to be untouched, forgotten, yet the dog was acting like it was the center of something far bigger. The German shepherd trembled, but didn't back away. Instead, he lowered his head, sniffed the wooden floor, and let out a short, sharp bark. Not random, not fearful, purposeful. "Show me," Blake whispered. The dog stepped forward, slow, limping, wincing, but with precision. He sniffed the floorboards, then moved toward the back wall of the shed. Blake watched closely. Every movement had intention. Even injured, the shepherd navigated the tight space with disciplined patterns, sweeping side to side like he was running an official canine search. But this wasn't a normal search pattern. It was advanced, elite level. "Where did you come from?" Blake murmured. The dog paused at a stack of old crates, then lifted his paw and tapped the corner twice. Blake's breath hitched. That was a command he recognized. A canine indicator for hidden objects. "You're trained for deep searches," Blake whispered. "Not just surface level." He moved the crates aside, dust rising in the air. The dog's breathing sped up, his eyes focused intensely on one specific spot. He lowered his head again and pressed, his nose against a narrow gap between two boards. Another bark. Low, short, direct, defined. Blake hesitated only a second before prying the loose board up with his fingers. Beneath it was a small recess, dark and dusty, as if untouched for years. But Blake immediately saw something off. Footprints, fresh, not his. Someone had accessed this space recently. Inside the recess, something metallic glinted. Blake reached in and retrieved a small dented storage tin. He set it on the floor beside him. The dog didn't look away. He stood guard over it just like a trained canine protecting evidence. "You're not retired," Blake whispered. "You're still working." He opened the tin carefully. Inside were fragments of torn paper, a broken microchip, and a faded patch from a police vest. One Blake didn't recognize. The dog nudged the patch with his nose, then looked up at Blake with desperate urgency. "You're trying to tell me something," Blake said breathlessly. "Trying to show me what happened." The shepherd let out a soft, frustrated whine, as if the truth was right there, but Blake wasn't fast enough to understand it. He placed a steady hand on the dog's head. "Don't worry." On listening, the dog closed his eyes for a moment, exhausted. But his tail moved just once. Trust, connection, partnership. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This dog had a mission, and Blake had just become part of it. Back inside the house, Blake laid the metal tin on the kitchen table, his mind spinning with more questions than answers. The dog followed him slowly, limping heavily yet refusing to rest. His eyes stayed sharp, locked on Blake as if urging him to keep going, to put the pieces together. Blake crouched beside him again and gently lifted the dog's chin to inspect his collar more closely. The leather was old, cracked, and worn down, but something about it didn't look accidental. It wasn't a typical standard-issue canine collar he had seen dozens of times. There were cuts, precise cuts made intentionally. Blake turned it over, squinting under the kitchen light. A faint metal plate was stitched to the underside of the collar, almost invisible beneath the torn leather, but the plate had been scratched aggressively. Deep gouges that had erased whatever numbers once engraved there. "Someone tried really hard to hide who you are," Blake whispered. The dog whined softly, pressing his head into Blake's palm as if acknowledging the truth. Blake retrieved a flashlight and angled the beam across the damaged plate. Even scratched, he could see hints of shapes. The curved tail of a number, the faint top of a letter. Not enough to read, but enough to prove this dog once belonged to a high-level unit. Normal canine units weren't given metal ID plates stitched inside collars. Only specialized units were. Blake fetched a magnifier from a drawer and leaned in closer. The dog remained perfectly still, disciplined, patient, as though he had been trained for investigative handling. "There must be something left," Blake murmured. "Some part they couldn't scratch out." Then he saw it. A tiny mark on the edge of the plate. A marking no scratch could erase completely. A symbol, a triangle with a line through it. Blake's eyes widened. "That's impossible." Only one K9 division used that symbol, a classified tactical unit known internally as Unit 9. Their dogs weren't deployed for patrol work or drug detection. They were used for undercover operations, high-risk stings, and deep infiltration missions only a handful of officers even knew existed. And they never retired their dogs to the public ever. "How did you end up dumped at a roadside sale for $10? Blake whispered. The dog let out a deep, low huff. Not a bark, not a growl. A sound of frustration, grief, and urgency combined. Blake sat back, adrenaline kicking into overdrive. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase this dog's identity, to erase his past, and that meant only one thing. The dog wasn't discarded. He was silenced. Blake stood, fists tightening. Someone wanted you gone, not retired, not rehomed. He looked down at the dog, whose gaze burned with fierce intelligence. "But you survived," Blake whispered. "And now I need to find out why." The dog slowly rose, wobbling but determined, and tapped Blake's foot twice. The same deliberate signal as before. A command, a message, a vow. They weren't done, not even close. Blake barely had time to process the meaning of the symbol before the dog suddenly stiffened. His ears perked, his body tensed, and he stared toward the back, door as if someone had whispered his name through the night. "What is it?" Blake asked quietly. The dog limped forward, urgency overriding the pain in his legs. He scratched once at the door, then turned to Blake and barked, sharp, insistent. The same pattern as before, a call to follow. Blake grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside into the cool night air. The yard was still, the moon casting long shadows across the grass, but the dog didn't hesitate. He pushed ahead of Blake, limping with determination toward the old shed again. "You already showed me what was inside," Blake murmured. But the shepherd didn't slow. He wasn't heading to the shed door this time. He circled to the back of the shed, a side Blake almost never looked at. "There." The dog pressed his nose against the wooden boards and let out a shaky whine. He scratched at the ground, weak but insistent. "You want me to dig?" Blake asked. The dog barked once, a confirmation. Blake knelt and began brushing away leaves and loose dirt. At first, he expected nothing more than roots and soil, but then the beam of his flashlight hit something metallic buried beneath the shed's foundation. A handle Blake's breath caught. What in the world? He dug faster, his hands scraping against cold metal until a rectangular frame revealed itself. A concealed hatch, no larger than a briefcase lid, almost perfectly hidden beneath the shed. The dog backed away, giving him space but never taking his eyes off the hatch. Blake swallowed hard, then pulled. The hatch resisted at first, rusted from years of neglect, but after a firm tug, it snapped open with a metallic groan. A gust of cold, stale air escaped. Inside the hidden compartment lay a small, waterproof black case, sleek, professional, governmental. Blake lifted it carefully, his pulse hammering. "Is this what they were looking for?" he whispered. The dog lowered his head, nose inches from the case, breathing anxiously. His body language changed from urgency to fear, not fear of the box itself, fear of what it contained. Blake set the case on the ground and carefully opened it. Inside were folders, dozens of them, marked with red classified stamps. Photographs of officers, some Blake recognized, some he didn't, documents with names crossed out, bank records. And at the bottom, a video camera, old, dusty, but still intact. Blake's hands trembled. This wasn't just evidence. This was a cover-up. And the dog wasn't just a victim. He was the only witness left alive. Blake looked at the shepherd, understanding finally flooding through him. "You were there, weren't you? You saw what they did?" The dog's ears dropped, a gesture of acknowledgement mixed with sorrow. Whatever had happened to Unit 9, whatever corruption ran through the department, this dog had evidence. And someone had tried to silence him permanently. But Blake had found him first. "We're going to expose this," Blake said, his voice steady. "All of it." The dog rested his head on Blake's knee, and for the first time since their meeting, his breathing eased. He wasn't alone anymore. And Blake wasn't just an officer anymore. He was a partner in the most dangerous investigation of his life. Blake carefully placed all the documents into a secure bag, his mind racing with the implications. He knew that what he was holding could destroy careers and lives, and expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of his department. But he also knew that walking this path meant danger, not just for himself, but for the dog. Someone wanted these documents buried. Someone wanted the dog dead. And now that Blake was involved, someone would be coming for both of them. As he stood in the darkness of his backyard, the German shepherd by his side, Blake made a decision. He couldn't go to his department. He couldn't trust anyone in uniform. The corruption ran too deep. Instead, he would need to contact someone outside the system, someone who dealt in truth and justice, a journalist perhaps, or the FBI, someone who could protect them and ensure that the truth came out. The dog looked up at him, those intelligent eyes reflecting the moonlight. Blake knelt down and wrapped his arms around the shepherd. "We're getting out of here tonight," he whispered. "And we're taking this truth with us." The dog let out a soft whine, then pressed his head against Blake's chest. It was a gesture of trust, of bond, of partnership forged in the darkness but destined for the light. Blake stood, lifted the case, and made his way back to the house. Time was running short. Whoever had dumped the dog at that flea, Market would eventually realize their mistake. They would realize that Unit 9's secret witness was still alive. And when they did, they would come looking. Blake moved quickly through the house, gathering essentials. He took his personal laptop, cash from a hidden safe, and documents of his own. He packed a bag for the dog with food, water, and a blanket. Then, with one last look around the home he'd spent years building, Blake loaded everything into his patrol car. The dog settled into the passenger seat, no longer trembling, no longer fearful. There was purpose now. There was a mission. And there was Blake, as Blake drove through the quiet streets of the town, heading toward the highway and away from everything familiar. He made a mental list of who to contact. He knew a former FBI agent who had gone private. He knew journalists at major outlets who investigated corruption. He knew people in the system who were honest, who had grown tired of the lies. But first, he needed to get the dog somewhere safe. Somewhere they couldn't find them. Somewhere Blake could piece together the full picture of what Unit 9 had done, who was involved, and how deep the corruption went. The German Shepherd pressed his head against Blake's arm, a gesture Blake had come to recognize as reassurance. The dog had survived the worst. He had been tortured, discarded, left for dead. And yet he had chosen Blake, he had guided Blake to the evidence. He had shown courage and intelligence that no ordinary dog possessed. Whatever Unit 9 had trained this dog to do, whatever black ops they had sent him on, it hadn't broken him. And now, together, Blake and this dog were going to bring the truth to light. Hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, Blake pulled into a small motel just outside the state line. He checked in under a false name, paid cash, and carried the dog into a quiet room at the back. The shepherd collapsed on the bed immediately, exhaustion finally claiming him. Blake sat at the small desk, opened his laptop, and began to write. He documented everything. The flea market, the cellar, the injuries on the dog, the hidden compartment, the documents, the classified symbol. Unit 9, all of it went into a secure email that he would send to multiple sources simultaneously. Insurance, backup, proof that if anything happened to him or the dog, the truth would still get out. As he typed, Blake occasionally glanced at the sleeping dog beside him. That morning at the flea market seemed like a lifetime ago. A $10 rescue that had spiraled into something far greater. A dog that was supposed to be silenced, that had instead become the key to unraveling one of the largest cover-ups in departmental history. Blake finished his email, encrypted it, and scheduled it to send in 72 hours if he didn't manually disable it. Then he lay down beside the dog, one hand resting on the shepherd's side, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Tomorrow they would contact the FBI. Tomorrow they would begin the process of bringing Unit 9 to justice. But tonight, for the first time in what must have been months for the dog, they slept in safety. Two unlikely partners bound by chance and choice about to change everything. And as Blake drifted off to sleep, he thought about the word the flea market seller had used, useless. That dog had never been useless. He had been remarkable. Trained, intelligent, resilient, brave. Someone had tried to erase him, to silence him, to make him disappear. But instead, this retired police dog from Unit 9 had found Blake, and together, they were about to become the most dangerous force that corruption had ever faced.